Hi, my name's Adam and I run foraging courses in and around North Devon, so covering wild plants and seaweeds, and today we're going to be going around Braunton looking at what sort of wild ingredients we can find. Okay, so this plant here with the sort of almost circular leaf with the frilly edge, this one's known as a Pennywort or navelwort, and the binomial name for this can give you a bit of a clue as to also how it looks insofar as navel, being umbilicus rupestris. So umbilicus insofar as umbilical cord, belly button, and rupestris, which is it likes to grow amongst rocks. So rups is rocks and estris is where it grows. So that kind of gives you a bit of a clue insofar as where to find it. This one is one of the common sort of salad snacks, one of the sort of favourites of the foragers, sort of known as the wayfarer's snack. And often you find it in this kind of space really, along rocky walls or possibly on mossy clumps on trees and forests. A few things to be mindful of with this one, which brings you around to things like foraging principles, is to work with the space, with the ecology, and making sure that you're working again with the space and not just sort of taking what you want and moving gently. So these can be quite shallow rooted, so if you were to just pull the whole plant or be quite rough with pulling it, then you're going to pull the whole plant out, unroot it, and then that'll be the end of its life. So when taking a leaf, it's just a case of carefully taking each one and plucking by the stem, and that way you can just easily pop it into your basket without disrupting the plant too much. Okay, so we have another good edible here, which is also known as the herald of spring. So when these start coming out, you know that spring's on its way. So there's different aspects you can eat with primrose. So the first part you can eat is the flower. So again, just being careful with your harvesting techniques, just gently plucking the flower from the stem. They have quite a subtle but very beautiful fragrance, which you can get through the taste as well. So these can be used just as a salad, sort of garnishing a salad. You can make a pure flower salad with a whole range of different wild flowers out there. Also, you can crystallise the petals, which are also a nice addition in sort of baking. But in addition to the flowers, you can also eat the leaves. So again, I'd just take maybe just 1 or 2 leaves per plant. So again, a foraging principle is not to over-harvest, working sustainably with the plants. So the general idea is no more than say 20% of either an individual plant or plant community. This allows the plant to continue its life as well as other creatures and things that might be utilising the plant also. Insofar as identifying the primrose leaf, of course when the flowers are out, so that makes it a lot easier to notice and identify. But if it's early spring and the flowers aren't quite present yet, there's a few distinctive features with the primrose leaf which helps you identify. So it has a smooth surface, which you can sort of tell by bending and seeing that there's no hairs on top, whereas it does have quite a hairy underside with these quite distinctive veins which spread out to the edges of the leaves. And at the tip of the stem, the base of the leaf, it has this sort of almost purple staining. So this can be confused with foxglove, which has more of a bluish tint to it, but there's quite a distinctive reddy purple staining at the base of the leaf. And this can just be used as again a general salad leaf mixed through. A slightly bitter taste, which will be good for stimulating the digestive systems, but when mixed with things like pennywort and wild garlic, adds a nice sort of leaf to add to the mix. Okay, so we've got a really nice patch of wild garlic here, so it's great to see this much. So again, thinking about the idea of not taking too much from a certain area, you can see it's quite abundant, a bit of a zone of abundance. So it's okay to take some from here. Just also being mindful of how close we are to a footpath, and so maybe dog walkers coming along this way. So there is something sort of known as the dogweed zone. So thinking about where you're gathering from, is it a clean site? Is there any runoff from farmlands? Is there any runoff from sort of polluted areas in cities and things? And also tending to sort of trying to gather from things at least either above hip height or maybe a bit further into the space, so it's not going to be covered in things that you basically don't want to be consuming. So here with the wild garlic, just thinking about different uses. It can be used just purely as a really good, strong flavoured salad leaf. It could be used to flavour breads, pastas, and also for uses in things like wild pestos. And here's another good example too about just being mindful when you are foraging in these wild spaces. It can be quite tempting just to be quick and take handfuls of plants and just rip them all out, pop them in the basket and carry on. But nestled amongst these different plants is you have the ones which are again toxic. So you have dog's mercury here, which if you look from the top down, you can see almost like a star shaped leaf arrangement with these small flowers on top and these long flower spikes and a very distinctive stem. So it has these two ridges along the stem. So if you just twiddle it between your finger and thumb, you can feel those ridges, which makes a quite clear identification feature. So again, if you are just grabbing all this garlic, you could easily just have a one or two of these leaves or other toxic leaves that go in the basket. So it's really being really mindful to be slow and steady and just making sure that you're gathering exactly what you're after. Okay, so we have another flower here that can be used, but not just a spring flower. This flowers out all year round. There is a saying that when the gorse is in flower that it's time for kissing, and again, so it gives you an idea of its year-long availability insofar as it's good all year. So this flower can be used again in salads. It's quite versatile in that way, but it's also often used in cordial making as well as in use for teas and wine making. So this flower has two flavours dependent on the weather. If it's a bright sunny day, you'll get that sort of scent of coconut on the air, and it has a really strong scent and flavour of coconut. So it can be used for that flavour in that regard. But if it's an overcast day, then it'll almost be a lot more of a duller flavour, and you'll get almost like a pea flavour from it. So again, this one is the ones where it's accessible all year round, but the flavour can be dependent on the weather. Okay, so I have a nice patch of cleavers down here. So this is a plant with a long rambling stem, these whorls of leaves which go around the stem, and a very distinctive sticky nature to it, so it should stick to your clothes, which is a very good identification feature. This plant, again, due to the small hooks which give it its sticky nature, make it not so great as a raw edible. You can use the tips in salads, but personally for me it's one best cooked. So it could be stir-fried, or a common recipe is mixed through pakoras or various other sort of baked goods. And for me though, this is best used as a tea. So as a medicinal aspect of it, it's a very good lymphatic system cleanser. It's a really good spring tonic, and again it grows very abundantly in the spring, so the perfect time to be drinking it. So you can either do a hot or a cold infusion. My personal preference is to fill a good old cafetiere full of it with some boiling water, leave it overnight and have a nice cold pint in the morning, just to really give that refreshing start to the day. And to give you an idea of how abundant it is and how versatile it is, if you give it a good old scrunch, despite its quite dry, sticky nature, you can get a really good amount of juice out of the plants. So rather than go to your local health food shop and spend several pounds on a wheatgrass shot, just go out to the hedgerows and get some cleavers. So here we have a wild geum, either known as wood avens or herb bennets, and this one can be identified because it has these trio of leaves at the top of the stem, and then further down these two which almost sort of circle around, so it gives you an idea of some identification features. Now there's two uses of this one again, or two key uses. One is use of the leaf as a pot herb, so again just getting it into your soups or stews. But the real benefit of this leaf is in the roots. So I've left this one in the ground and brought this one along to show, because thinking of the legalities around foraging, so it is okay to be gathering wild plants, but only the aerial parts, only anything above ground. So it's unfortunately illegal to be uprooting plants unless you have the landowner's permission. And also thinking about the spaces that you go to, obviously open spaces, communal spaces are fine, but also there's the idea of a trespass, so just thinking about where you're gathering from and making sure that everything you do is within the law. But if you have this, I mean, this is often in people's gardens, so if you have got it there and you're weeding, then just make use of it instead of putting it on the compost heap. And the strength lies in the roots. So it has good eugenol content, up to 70% in comparison with cloves. And another common name is clove root. So it's a bit of a scratch and sniff. So if you just scratch off through the mud and get the outer layer of the stem off, you can get a really good scent of cloves, and just use it as you would cloves. So dry it out, powder it, use it as a wild spice, and also use it as a flavouring for baking. So again here we've got some wild food in a different space along the riverside. So So there's a whole range of habitats where you could go out for your wild food gathering, be it in hedgerows, woodlands, and also along the riverbanks. We have things like the nettle, which is one of the most nutritious wild plants out there. Generally, as a rule, 3 times more nutrient dense than you would have with cultivated plants, so it's a really key one to get into your diet. Of course, there are those hairs which are stinging, which can be a bit of a problem if you're gathering, so wearing gloves and using scissors is a way around that, or just a very firm grip to pinch the leaf from the stem. Thinking about some of the plants we've looked at, it could be mindful just to check underneath, because you might find aphids on these things, so either it's a case of just knocking them off or finding another plant specimen to go to. But this is a really great one for having things like in making soup as a good tea, and yeah, a whole range of different ways to use this plant. But whilst we're here, nettle is right next to this this sort of quite plant here, which looks actually quite tasty. It almost looks like parsley. But this one is actually the most deadliest plant in the UK, the hemlock water dropwort, and it often grows near waterways. So again, it's just one of those things to be really careful about when you are gathering wild food, is to be taking leaves either one by one, or just being really clear about what you're gathering, because it's quite easy to take a bit of this as you're gathering your other plants. And of course you may come into a whole heap of trouble if you get something like this into your diet. So just being really careful, really clear, and foraging safely.